I'm good. I'm good. Are we on Talking Joe?
Live from the Talking Joe studios. It's Talking Joe.
Talking Joe Weekly Podcast. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe thought we would last. Talking Joe is there. Find each other like a married couple. Our podcast on the air. Talking Joe is there.
Talking Joe is the code name for a completely untrained special podcast force. Its purpose, to produce a regular comic review show while breaking and replacing a series of presenters from across the world.
Talking Joe. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe. We are on our soapbox. Nobody seems to care. Fighting for fandom wherever there's trouble. The podcast on the air. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe. Talking Joe.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey, Mark here. Welcome to Talking Joe with a very special episode. Today we are talking to Bill Ratner, one of Hollywood's premier voiceover artists, a published poet, essayist, fiction writer, spoken word performer. His voice can be heard on movie trailers, TV promos, commercials, documentaries, video games, but most importantly, he is the cartoon voice of Flint on the G.I. Joe Sunbow cartoon, appearing in many episodes over the course of the mid-80s, including G.I. Joe the movie, which is celebrating its 35th anniversary this year. So this summer, Talking Joe talks to Bill Ratner. But I'm not doing it alone. I am joined by, as always, Tim Finn. And here he is.
Hello, Mark, and hello, listeners.
Tim, stop going on. We've got a person waiting in the wings.
Let's bring him in.
Bring him in. Hi, Bill. How are you?
Ladies and gentlemen, Talking Joe is on the air with Mark Talking Joe and Tim Finn all across the English-speaking map.
Thank you.
Bill, are you in a home studio?
I'm in a home studio, and it used to be, 20-some years ago, that voiceover guys and women used to go to these fancy multi-million-dollar production facilities. But nowadays, I think the majority of us are in their closets. And as long as the clothes are hanging right and there are enough of them, it can sound, and you have a decent microphone with your laptop, it can sound great. This is my control room. Let's dignify it a little bit. And I have a 7 by 7 by 7 foot plywood box that I have been living in as a voice actor for the last 30 years.
Wow.
And the only people that can yank us out are the computer game people. They don't like the fact that each home studio sounds just a little bit different. And, the acoustics are going to be different from basement to basement. And so we'll have to go to Technicolor or some, fancy, expensive post-production house for Electronic Arts or whoever's making the game. Otherwise, I'm in my basement all day long.
Is that a
basement? If you get the lights off with uplighting, that would be perfect.
Is that a basement? I feel like I see light coming in from a window on your right, on my left.
This was the former owner's dark room. He was a photographer.
Oh.
And when we moved in and had an architect doing some things, he said, "Would you like a window?" And I said, "Well, there is no window." He said, "We just get a sledgehammer and knock a hole in the wall. You'll have a window." So I have a window. It's very nice. It's double pane glass with Venetian blinds and lots of dust. And I have a window. There is real light coming in.
But if
Excellent.
someone's mowing their lawn next door, is that window thick enough or is your 7x7x7 plywood cube?
It's thick enough, and they're a few yards away.
Okay.
There's a voiceover guy, very well known, named Joe Cipriano, who does mainly network promos and so on. And he lives in a lovely home in Beverly Hills. And his studio was in his den with no obvious soundproofing. I mean, there was a lovely thick carpeting on the floor and so on. And I said, but what happens if somebody's mowing their lawn? And he said, Bill, this is Beverly Hills. The lawns are quite some distance apart. Oh, okay. Well, gotcha. Yeah, but I'm not in Beverly Hills. I didn't know that. Mark, where exactly are you?
I'm in Brighton on the south coast.
You're in Brighton. Okay, great. And how on earth did you get involved in all this?
I grew up reading Action Force comics, which were initially UK originated and then reprinting the American stuff, and buying all of the Action Force toys as they came out, which is largely the same as the American toys, and getting hooked. And
were the
all of these years later
in Action Force, did the characters retain their original names? Flint, Lady J, Duke, Scarlet, etc.
Yeah, for the most part. There was a period where they were kind of trying to sort of rebrand it a little bit, like repaint it. But for the most part, once we got to, I think it was 87 in the UK, they started releasing the American figures as is without too much of changing of the names. But so that was the year of Flint, and I think he was called Flint, and the same file name, but I think his birth location was changed to like an English city, it was a cathedral city.
Very interesting. I wonder if the toys were the same. I'm assuming they didn't remint the action figures.
No, so for the most part, it was exactly the same tooling and the same figures with like a change to the logo. And the cartoons we didn't get it airing on terrestrial TV, but we got them released on video.
Right.
And the only difference that they really made was that we had a different song at the front. And
American hero. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Instead of getting rid of the American hero bit, and we whenever the characters would shout "Yo, Joe," they would shout "Full Force" in a kind of slightly weird, overdubbed way.
And they obviously hired English voice actors.
Yeah, but it was only small elements of I guess English voice actors just doing those slight overdubs just to get rid of some of the Americanisms.
It took all our voices away.
They did.
But it was better than what the Canadians did.
What did the Canadians do?
We had a union strike, Screen Actors Guild strike after 2 episodes of G.I. Joe, and the distributor said, well, then we're going to Canada, and fired all of us except for Destro and Cobra Commander, and those 2 actors worked, and the rest of them sounded like, oh, it's so cold out there. My tongue got froze to the battery before we took off there, don't you know?
Wow.
So that's why G.I. Joe only lasted 3 seasons. Tim, you hear it okay?
I can hear you well, Bill.
Oh,
we've got
what a pleasure to
you
meet
guys.
you over my computer.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan.
We no longer really exist, but we're here.
I'm a big fan of the cartoon. In college, I interned at Sunbow Productions.
And where was Sunbow exactly?
Sunbow at the time had an office in New York and an office in Los Angeles. And it was no longer Sunbow Productions. It was now Sunbow Entertainment. And this was 10 years after G.I. Joe. And it had grown into a boutique animation company rather than cranking out hundreds of half hours in a few years, mostly for Hasbro. It was making 1 or 2 shows at a time, mostly for cable television.
Interesting. So 10 years earlier, they were simply the physical production arm that Hasbro contracted with.
Indirectly, Hasbro. So Sunbow grew out of Griffin Bacall, which was Hasbro's advertising agency. Do you remember a show called The Great Space Coaster?
Maybe, yeah.
sort of like Sesame Street.
Mm-hmm.
So the two principals at the ad agency were thinking big in 80, 81, 82, and we're already branching into television. And since the G.I. Joe toy commercials had a few seconds of animation, putting two and two together, well, let's make a separate company that's sort of us anyway. We're already making television. We're already contracting out animation. Let's make half hours of animation. And so Marvel Productions out on the West Coast was then subcontracted to do the actual animation. And then Marvel and Sunbow subcontracted to, a studio in Japan to do the actual animation.
Right. Yeah.
Excellent. One of the questions I wanted to start off with, because we sort of the standard thing will be to go chronological. So I'm going to sort of zig when I could be zagging, and my first question is going to be, as the actor sort of known for this character Flint, have you the Flint guy, have you accumulated an enormous amount of Flint related paraphernalia?
This is
I've got one of my.
This is a tragic story. Mark. Send that to me for free of charge. I'd appreciate it. I had no idea. None of us had any idea what we were auditioning for, what we were really recording. We thought perhaps this is a commercial for the initial G.I. Joe 11.5-inch figure that was produced years earlier by Hasbro. And then once we were hired, it was only for a 6-episode miniseries, with Flint, Lady J, Scarlet, Duke, Destro Commander, etc. Cobra Commander, Destro. And it took years for me to get the fact that Hasbro was making tens of millions of dollars a minute off the action figures from the Joe team, as the Joe team was growing character by character. And so the answer is no. I have a single poster on my wall. I have a comic book that was a single comic book with Lady J and Flint on the cover that was given to me by a comic book store in New York City in Manhattan. And I have a screw top bottle of shampoo where Flint's head comes off the top when you want to pour your little drop of shampoo. That's it. And this is a sad story because I'd be a wealthier man if I had been smart.
Right. Well, maybe we'll have to remedy that and sort of try and get you some G.I. Joe paraphernalia.
For Joe fans out there, if you're aging, you want to put me in your will for some of your action figures. This would benefit me and my children. That's for sure.
I have seen at Transformers conventions, I have seen fans give a toy in the package, a newer one, to the actor who plays that character.
Right.
And then the actor says, "Oh, can I sign this for you?" And the fan says, No. I love the show. Your work is so important to me. Please take this gift." And the actor's bowled over.
Tim, this has never happened. Actually, it happened once with a comic book. But Hasbro used to put on, I don't think they still do, JoeCon, which was a great event. Where I met the great animator Larry Hama and the marketing director for Hasbro and all kinds of other voice actors and so on. And we were tasked with signing, action figures and photos and so on for a couple of hours each day. And there was one young man who got in line about 2 or 3 times with a duffel bag full of action figures and vehicles and stills and so on. And, this was our gig, and we signed. One of the security guys came up to him and said, wait a minute, guy, you're getting in line for the 3rd time with another duffel bag full of this stuff, literally. And he said, I said, what, do you make your living off of it? And the guy turned to him and he said, yeah, what do you think? Of course I do. So yeah, but I mean, I, been in a lot of toy stores and a lot of cons, and, as we all know, the truth is, Joe fans collect this stuff out of love. And I've seen some beautiful, eye-popping displays. This used to be children's playroom, but I took it over, and it's packed with, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of Joe toys and vehicles. So
you are talking to two guys who know and love the cartoon and the toy, but who might lean a little bit more towards paper. You'll notice many books behind Mark, and let's call these books behind me. And I own a bookstore, and I'm writing a book. So the room filled with things for us is a little more likely to be bound paper.
Now, how do you describe the books generically? What would you say that they are?
Well, for me, the umbrella term, the art form is comics.
Right.
And comics is either comic books, which is 30 pages and stapled, or a graphic novel, which is any comic book with a spine.
Right. Okay, gotcha.
Bill,
I'm the saddest part of my story is my father gave me a G.I. Joe comic book from the 50s. And it was G.I. Joe, the character who was born in World War II, who fought in the Korean War. And I think this is a Korean War era comic book, but it had this big, square jawed, angry face and veins sticking out of his forehead. Nothing like the handsome Dashiell Fairborn, and smoking a cheap cigar and an automatic weapon in his hand, and fighting in the Korean War in the 50s. And that was the original G.I. Joe. So Joe has been prettified and cloned into the great and everlasting Joe team.
I was going to share this image here, because this is the brand new Flint toy from Super 7, based on the animation look of the character. So I don't know. Presumably, have you seen this before?
No, I have not. This is as I was talking about being prettified. I mean, look at this guy. He's like a ramp model. I love you, man. I am you. You are me. We are all together.
So yeah, this is a brand new line of. This is like for the adult collector of the toys, where it's ultra deluxe.
No, I don't want to sully this conversation by talking about Hollywood cinema, but was this line inspired by what I believe to be the third live action G.I. Joe film from Paramount?
There was a separate toy line just for that movie, which came out last summer.
Oh, okay.
This line is new and very specifically tries to capture the look of the 80s TV cartoon.
Bless their hearts. Is this obviously there's licensing with Hasbro, but does Hasbro have a direct hand in all this?
I think for this line, beyond approvals, no. But this line is more expensive, partly because it is licensed to another toy company, and partly because it's got so many accessories, and maybe partly because aimed at the adult collector, they pick a price that they think the adult collector will pay. But if you go back a step to the similarly large 6-inch toy line that Hasbro is making right now, making itself, right, not licensing out, there is, Mark, can you hold up your figure again? Yeah. So this Flint figure that Mark's got came out, was it this past year?
Yeah, I think it was last year it came out.
And is supposed to look like the toy from the 80s, with a few modern touches in terms of gear, and then as much detail as modern toy making can handle. And if you put this new toy that Mark's got next to that image that he just showed you of the animation one, you can see how one looks like a real person and the other looks like a flat, stylized animation model turned into 3D. And there is overlap in the audience. There are people who are buying both of them. There are people who, are less interested in the cartoon one. They want the more realistic military stuff. And there are people who are more interested in the cartoon one.
I don't want to freak anybody out, but my favorite Joe action figures, and I don't remember the name of the guys. They had a booth at JoeCon in Cincinnati, I believe, and they had taken apart the initial 3.5-inch toys from the 80s, the action figures, and they made them into Santa Clauses, hula dancers, long distance runners, disco kings. It was really, but still, in character with the head of Flint and Duke, it's Cobra Commander, etc. And they had essentially operated on these on the action figures, and they had replaced the rubber bands, and they had sort of made them a little more durable. And I don't think they gave them to their children. I think that these were their special toys.
Of course, you can't have kids playing with toys.
No,
They're
no.
too important for that.
They exhibited them at cons and sold them as well. And I was really amused by the sort of the mutation of the original action figures.
Now, if I can ask another question, one of the things that kind of surprised me as I was doing my research, it was that kind of, it sounds like you were pretty much involved in the cartoon from the beginning, whereas I'd assumed that you would have come into it later in terms of the order of the way that they screened on the TV, because I think you appeared in the second miniseries, The Revenge of Cobra. So I assumed by the time you got involved, G.I. Joe was already like a smash hit that had, aired.
My understanding of the history of it and my experience of it is it started with a huge cattle call audition where there were over 100 of us, literally, lined up in the street on a nice sunny day in Southern California, Studio City.
Oh, crikey. Literally lined in the street.
Literally lined up.
Wow.
And the production people from Hasbro passed out to each one of us a single sheet, black and white Xerox copy of a sort of primitive drawing of a particular character. I got Flint and about 25 seconds worth of dialogue printed on the page. In front of me was my friend Mary McDonald Lewis, who I had already known personally, who played Lady J, and she was going, "Yo, Joe, yo, Joe." I said, "What are you doing?" "I'm moving my lines. I'm practicing my lines." And in that line was every voice actor in Hollywood who I had known over the years, plus aging character actors from cowboy television shows in the 50s and 60s. Have Gun Will Travel, Gunsmoke, and guys who'd played bad guys in minor roles on television. They had called out old character actors, voice actors, everybody they could get. And we had no idea that this was a huge marketing and merchandising plot by Hasbro. So the first thing that happened was the mass audition. Nothing had been recorded, nothing had been drawn except for the characters and the individual character sketches. About 3 weeks later, I got a phone call from my agent. "Well, you got the gig for G.I. Joe." "Well, what is it? Is it a commercial or what is it?" No. You're playing this character named Flint in the first miniseries. And so it was the first one of 6 in which Duke, Scarlet, Lady J, Flint, Cobra Commander, Destro, and a few others appeared. I think there were 8 of us in the studio on the first day of recording. And because of parent group protests, PTA groups, church groups went to Hasbro and said, "We're not going to buy any more of your toys if you air this terrible, violent war cartoon on Saturday mornings for our innocent children." And so at the first recording session, the classic Hollywood script girl, probably an intern or somebody who just started with Hasbro, was passing out the scripts to the voice actors, all of us lined up at our microphones. She said, "I'm supposed to announce 2 things. One, nobody dies in G.I. Joe." We looked at each other and said, "Wait a minute, this is a war story." Well, parent groups have gotten involved in lodged protests with the parent company. And so, as you'll see in the animation when it goes on the air, all of the bad guys who are shot out of the sky parachute innocently down over the horizon. So no one dies in G.I. Joe. The second thing she said was, a true story, I'm also supposed to tell you that you guys may want to buy some Hasbro stock. And we looked at each other like, wait a minute, what is this, a pyramid scheme? They're trying to make money on voice actors? Had I spent $100 on Hasbro stock on that first day of recording, obviously before the release of G.I. Joe or Transformers on the air as a cartoon, within about 3.5 years, my $100 would have been worth about $950. And so silly me, and the rest of us, this was sort of their version of insider trading light. And I think we asked her, "Why are you telling us this?" "I'm not supposed to say anymore." And partly because of the nature of the show and the fear of protests by toy buyers, the networks didn't want it. Didn't want Transformers or G.I. Joe. NBC, ABC, CBS. I don't remember if Fox was even in existence at that point. Didn't want it, and so the marketing team from Hasbro, and in league with the ad agency and perhaps Sunbow, had to put on their walking shoes and literally go station group to station group across the country. And this included mainly family-owned station groups. At that time, the FCC rules were that an ownership group could consist of no more than 12 television stations. So they would go to Tuscaloosa and Portland, Maine, and Tallahassee, and Portland, Oregon, and selling door to door the idea of a 6-episode miniseries about G.I. Joe. And it worked. Enough stations bought it. Station groups bought it. They aired it, and the ratings were terrific. And thus were commissioned 13 more episodes from Sunbow and Hasbro. So that's the story as I understand it. We didn't know that it was particularly successful, except for the fact that we kept being called back in every week for a new episode. And the most one of the more amusing moments of my career on G.I. Joe was suddenly there was a sheaf of papers on my copy stand. And the producer from Hasbro came in and said, "You're not going to get paid extra for these." And I said, "Well, what are they?" "They're public service announcements. You know, the parent groups are all freaked out about G.I. Joe. It's on the air, but we're trying to, make them feel better." And thus came, "Come on, Timmy, don't throw your hardball through Sally's window next door. That could cause some damage. And now you know, and knowing's half the battle."
Turkey, now we might lose.
Hold on there.
Flint!
Will yelling at Billy help?
Not really.
Look, if you want to play your best, you got to play like a team.
Yeah, Red! It's tied up!
The next time you get angry over a bad play, remember you need teamwork to win, not arguments.
Now we know.
And knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe!
And I think we did about, a couple dozen of those. And Disney did that kind of crap in the back of their children's books, these awful little morality pages that had nothing to do with the book or anything else, that were probably put there because some high-level executive in Disney thought, well, shouldn't we moralize about something? And any parent who has old Disney books from the 50s and 60s, or grandparent, look in the back and you'll see these awful, saccharine little things. I think G.I. Joe did a lot better. "Come on, Bobby, don't hit your brother. He might cause a bruise. Now you know, and knowing's half the battle."
Now, this might be a good segue into something that I thought might be a little bit fun, that I'm calling the PSA 2022 challenge. So in a recent comic book, this one on the screen, Saturday Morning Adventures, it was a comic that just came out this year and kind of trying to recreate in comic form brand new stories in that sort of Sunbow style. It was called G.I. Joe Saturday Morning Adventures and published by IDW. The creative team was writer Eric Burnham, artist Dan Schoening, colorist Luis Antonio Delgado, plus ably supported by research specialist Diana Davis. And one of the fun things about the book is at the very back of the book, they have put in these sort of PSA sort of strips,
Right.
just like you would at the cartoon. So this one is about mainframe. And what I've done with the power of Photoshop is replace mainframe with Flint. And I wondered if you could indulge us in creating a brand new PSA from Flint based on this comic book that just came out this year, panel by panel.
Perfect.
So maybe Tim, if you're the narrator, and I'll be little Bobby there, and Bill can be Flint.
G.I. Joe presents Something to Know.
What? This isn't what I wanted to happen. The people who made this are stupid. And I'm gonna tell everybody how stupid they are. Bloop. My computer!
Having some trouble?
Flint!
Well, sounded like you were about to be pretty harsh there before your computer mysteriously crashed. The internet's a powerful tool for communication, but we don't need to attack others for a difference of opinion, especially over a story. That can make us the bad guy in our own story.
I don't want that, Flint. I guess it's good to cool down before I talk about things. Now I know.
And knowing is half the battle, you little twerp.
G.I. Joe!
No, just for your listeners, I improvised "you little twerp." That dark, for part of the audience, it might be amusing.
Very good.
Very
That was a
good,
lot of fun.
Very good. Excellent.
So actually, interestingly, as well, it's sort of in this area of internet safety that this today's PSA is about. Is you're a bit of a pioneer because you wrote a book specifically about is it called Parenting in the Digital Age?
Yeah, Parenting for the Digital Age: The Truth About Media's Effect on Children and What to Do About It. And this was born really in the first season of G.I. Joe. I was at a kids camp where my kids were going, and I was teaching stuff just to get a break on the tuition at camp. And I did a G.I. Joe class. And of course, all the boys and a couple of girls who were big fans joined the group. And this is in the 80s. And we tried to estimate if you were to buy one action figure of every character and one attack vehicle, of every issue, how much would you have to pay? And they estimated back then, spent a few minutes really calculating, around $1,800, which in today's money is more like $4,000. And by that point, I was aware of the sort of brilliant satanic marketing that Hasbro was doing. President Ronald Reagan, the deregulator, the great communicator, had somehow cowed the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, into undoing its regulations that had been in effect for children's television since the 1930s from Roosevelt. And one of the rules was, if you're producing a television show like Barbie, you can't advertise the Barbie doll within the show. You can advertise it within other shows, but kids under 7 have been proved by studies to be so vulnerable to advertising created by brilliant Harvard marketing MBAs aimed at the 6-year-old mind that it's just not fair play. But Ronald Reagan was able to get the FCC somehow. He appointed enough commissioners that were conservative enough and thought, yeah, what the hell, screw it. This is, it's free market. I mean, kids are fair game as far as advertisers are concerned. So once in G.I. Joe, Transformers, Barbie, etc., once it was allowable to advertise the action figures from that show within the 30 minutes, that's when Hasbro stock went up and Mattel's stock went up, and it became this, and that's when I should have bought stock. this behemoth of children's consumerism. So I thought, well, here I am. Of course, we, as voice actors, we just made session money off the sessions and then some residuals. None of us got rich, and of course, none of us got a dime off the action figures. But still, it was a cool gig that got us other work, and we were making money. So I went into the public schools as a volunteer and created a program called TV Cartoon Scandals, Media Awareness for Children. And the school in my neighborhood was mainly a poor kids' school. And so these were parents who were working 2 jobs, and their children were screaming, "I want Flint and Lady J." All right, shut up, I'll get them for you. And going into credit card debt. And this is my whole scenario in my head, right? And so I had a great time for a couple of years, going to schools every couple of weeks and doing an hour with kids and interviewing them and having fun and playing funny commercials and doing funny voices and kind of giving them the same thing my father gave me. He was an advertising guy, and he was very honest and candid and detailed with me as a kid as to why they were canceling my favorite shows on television. Well, they couldn't sell enough of you kids to the advertiser. And he explained the details of that. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to do what my dad did for me. And I was at a storytelling conference where I was paid to tell stories and teach workshops. And I took somebody else's workshop, and a woman sitting next to me said, "Have you ever written a book about your work with kids?" And I said, "No." "Why do you ask?" "Well, my husband and I just started a publishing company, Familius Books, books for the family." I thought, oh, well, cool. And they sent me a boilerplate book contract. And I wasn't a professional writer by any means. I'd done a lot of storytelling stuff and written short pieces and gotten some published. But so I started in on this book, Parenting for the Digital Age, and talked a lot about G.I. Joe and the history of G.I. Joe and what the sessions were like and what the merchandising was like, and talked about the history of Barbie, which is a really weird history, and talked about the secret history of Barbie and G.I. Joe, which is a whole other dark chapter.
Coming in June to the Hollywood Fringe Festival, the true life adventures of Barbie and G.I. Joe. Go behind the tattered curtain of Barbie's boudoir. Ride under the battlefield with Flint and the G.I. Joe team. Witness a Christmas night that will live in infamy. It's a tale of jealousy, media terror, and the fleecing of innocent children. A tawdry true story told by 9-time Moth Story Slam and 2-time Best of Hollywood Fringe Extension winner, Bill Ratner. That's me. How many things can one girl have? How many guns can one man shoot? How much do these dolls have to lose before they find out who they really are? The true life adventures of Barbie and G.I. Joe.
And there you go. True Life Adventures of Barbie and G.I. Joe. That is a poster from my Hollywood Fringe production called The True Life Adventures of Barbie and G.I. Joe, based on the cover of Barbie magazine during Operation Desert Storm in Kuwait, where the U.S. went in to beat back Saddam Hussein in Iraq. And Barbie and one of the characters, a generic member of the Joe team, were featured under an umbrella, sunning, half clad on the beach. And so anyway, I wrote an 85-page book. I didn't know what else to write. I sent it in. The publisher said, "This is great, Bill, but we're not going to publish an 85-page book, and just double the length." So I enrolled in a master's program at UC Riverside part-time. They had some good nonfiction teachers. And they said, just go interview parents, interview kids, interview sociologists, interview educators. And so I did, and had a really great time. It got published. I ended up at a bunch of TV stations around the country, and who were amused by the fact that I was making money on one hand. I was confronted actually at ABC, where I was doing promos for years, tonight on ABC, confronted by a young producer who said, "So, Bill, are you the guy who we pay to tell people to watch television, but you just wrote a book telling people not to watch television?" I said, "Well, it's not quite that simple." But I really had a great time, speaking before church groups and educate groups of educators, and to this day I still get emails about it, and I sell, I think, probably about 2 copies a year. Came out in 2014. But with COVID and kids on screen time and parents not knowing what the heck to do other than let their kids just spend as much time as possible, it's kind of come back as a controversial issue. Steve Jobs was interviewed before he died, and the New York Times writer who was interviewing him was very surprised when Jobs said, "Oh, no, we don't have iPhones or iPads or any of it in our house. No, absolutely not. That stuff is addictive. I wouldn't let my kids have that." And then this writer went on to interview CFOs and CEOs and CTOs of Silicon Valley companies, highly placed executives, all of whom said the same thing. No, that we don't have this. It's absolutely banned from our house. When a kid turn 18, if they want a smartphone, they can have it. But no, they got to get through school first, which I found absolutely fascinating. And of course, let my kids have smartphones, and I'd hide them in my sock drawer at night. But this is a very long-winded answer to your question about my penning a book about the media.
Absolutely. And so you've got this kind of conflicted kind of experience with the brand, sort of, I guess, enjoying the experience and affection for the character, but at the same time the pull of the devious toy industry. But you do keep on coming back to it. So for example, here we go, Family Guy.
Is that alcohol? Mister, you're in serious trouble.
He's absolutely right, kids, because when you drink, nobody wins. In fact, last year alone, there were over 27,000 deaths from chronic liver disease as a result of alcohol abuse.
Now we know!
And knowing is half the battle.
Appearance there.
Yes,
and
the Family Guy was really, really fun. That was one episode. And because I'm in my basement most of the time, I have a hard time scheduling myself at a distant recording studio. And Seth MacFarlane wanted Flint in an episode of Family Guy and wanted to schedule it on the lot at 20th Century Fox, which is quite some distance away. And we went back and forth, for days about this, me and my agent. Well, when can you go? Now, Thursday, I can't, blah, 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 blah. And finally, they said, well, Mr. MacFarlane is going to call you on the phone. You can do it in your studio. And I went, well, great, that's convenient. And I got a little nervous. I mean, he was a big celebrity, Seth MacFarlane, right? And he calls up, and please hold for Mr. MacFarlane. Hey, Seth, how you doing? He was nervous. I could hear it in his voice. And I said, Seth, so good to meet you, man. Why did you, tell me about this? Well, Bill, I'm a huge Flint fan, a huge G.I. Joe fan. I was 11 years old, and I thought, the tables have finally turned. This is great. It's no longer me in a Hollywood bistro looking at a celebrity, stuttering. Turn. And yeah, that episode was really fun. And then his, one of his production partners and friends, Seth Green from Robot Chicken, said, well, I want Flint. And we did a couple episodes of Robot Chicken, which are really wonderfully perverse and funny and crazy.
Hey guys, going on a mission? Can I come?
Sorry, Snow Job. This mission doesn't require skis.
Wearing a blindingly white outfit in the middle of jungle warfare makes you a very shootable target, man.
Bunch of GI jerks.
But to go back for a second about the good cop and bad cop in my head, at a JoeCon, there's a guy about 30 years old, much like you guys, who are very well versed in media history. And, he talked about it. He showed me pictures of his G.I. Joe collection and so on. And all of us sat down for supper one night at the con, and his mother and father were there. So just to be kind of silly and ironic, I turned to his mother, nice 60-year-old lady, and said, how do you feel about the fact that your son at age 30 is still playing with action figures? And she said, well, my son and I are both teachers in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania public schools. I teach ninth grade remedial English. And one year, the kids were in my class were doing so badly on literacy tests. The principal came to me and said, do something. So she said, I borrowed my son's G.I. Joe action figure collection, G.I. Joe comic book collection, and his VHS videotape collection of Joe episodes. And she created a literacy program out of just that, showing the videotapes, having them read the comic books and read them aloud, and then create scenarios based on the plots that were in the episodes. And she said within 9 months, the principal came to me and on the basis of testing found that the ninth graders in her class had raised the literacy rate by 50%. So there you have it. The moral and ethical reason for G.I. Joe.
Yeah, got me reading. So sort of slightly running out of time, so we don't probably have a long time for a long question. Tim, is there something burning that for you that you desperately want to ask?
Radio or TV or movies, when you were young, was there a performance that grabbed you, that helped set you on this path?
Yes, absolutely. And it lasted about 15 seconds. Because my dad was in advertising, I was more sort of sensitized to what I was hearing and seeing on television. The difference between the commercial and the actual cartoon show, so on like that. And I was 5 years old, 5.5 years old. I was in kindergarten. And my dad had bought us a brand new, great, big hardwood set, television set, black and white set. And so, yeah, this is on, this is off. Here's the volume. Enjoy the set, kid. And I was watching some silly afternoon television show. You know, Uncle Bobby is going on the railroad. We'll be right back after this. And I heard, and I remember this as though it were a year ago, a deep-throated announcer say, the following commercial message will be 60 seconds long, which apparently was a standard sort of operating procedure in the early days of commercial television. Of course, they don't do it now. And then came on, I believe it was an automobile commercial. I don't remember what brand, but, you know, Oldsmobile for 1953 and a happy family, you know, waving out the window and so on. And I was struck by this. I think I held my breath for 60 seconds. And I ran into the kitchen. I said, Mom, I know what a minute is. Oh, that's nice. What's that, dear? 60 seconds. Oh, did you learn that in kindergarten? No, the man on TV said so. So, Tim, the answer to your question is absolutely. That was the performance. And I somehow was so struck by that announcer's voice and the omniscience and omnipotence and invisibility that he had, and the power to simply enter my brain and say, this commercial message will be 60 seconds long. And it was educative, it was powerful, it was true, and my career path was set in that moment. So I went on to imitate. I borrowed one of my dad's little empty razor blade shaving kit things that looked like a tiny little radio, like a little broadcast tool. And I would go outside by myself. Do you hear me? Does anyone hear me? Doing imaginary broadcasts, talking to the sparrows on the power wire. And so I identified myself from age 5 as one of those guys who was going to do this. And I'm still doing this.
Excellent. Very good. And we can't let you go away without giving you an opportunity to promote the things that you want to promote. So what can people, where can people find you? What should people be looking out for?
I just happen to go on Bill Ratner, just Google Bill Ratner Amazon, and you will find Fear of Fish by Bill Ratner. I'm 6 years old, sucking my thumb. I was asked to do a poem about the Marvel Universe. for an anthology that's coming out here in Southern California from Freeze Ray Poetry. And because Marvel produced the comic books for G.I. Joe. And I believe that's in here and a bunch of other stuff. And then for the morbid in the crowd, To Decorated Casket by Bill Ratner. Available at, these are both done by small Southern poetry presses. This was from the Great Alien Buddha Press in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and the well-known Finishing Line Press in Georgetown, Virginia. So these are legit, not self-published, and my messages to the world. So Joe fans, Bill Ratner, Amazon.com. Buy, buy, buy.
Do it. Excellent. So it's been joy having you on to talk. Wish it could have been longer. I'm sure we could have gone for hours, Tim.
Could we get a sign off like this has been Talking Joe, or you've been listening to?
I need my hands to my ears to do this, Tim, just in case you're wondering. This has been another episode of Talking Joe. Talking Joe, where the truth may be told.
Thank you.
This on the screen at the moment is our standard outro, which I typically force Tim to sing, but I think it would be very apt if you can give us our standard outro today. So if you can see that.
Yes, I can. And I'll do this on one condition, that as soon as this episode goes up, you guys send me the link. I will blast it out to my tens of fans on the interwebs.
You'll be excited that our tens of fans will consider buying your twos of books.
Yes, two is better than one. All right, here we go. Nobody beats Talking Joe, an international podcast. Nobody beats Talking Joe, an international podcast. And for the happier crowd, nobody beats Talking Joe, an international podcast.
And for comparison, Tim, do you want to show him how you do it?
Bill, this is I think the 1988 toy commercials, the tag at the end. Nobody beats Talking Joe, an international podcast.
Now that had energy, Tim. It had youth. It had energy. It was a command. I would cast you over.
Sounds good.
And Tim, where can people find you?
Video essays from my creative partners and I are at Atomic Abe Productions, our YouTube channel. My brick and mortar store is Hub Comics in Somerville, Massachusetts. And my G.I. Joe blog is arealamericanbook.com.
All right, guys.
Excellent.
Really fun. Great questions. And it's so fun for me to talk with intelligent people about this wild miasma called The Legend of G.I. Joe on Talking Joe.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Right,
it was
guys.
a real treat.
Yo,
Thanks
Joe.
a lot.
Well, I have to say that the production values and the IQ, the Joe IQ on this show is the highest I've encountered in podcasts.
Well, I give most of the credit to Mark, who does most of the work, and I guess he was just smart enough to ask me along.
Yes. Good work.